The young and the restless spoilers Amanda Sinclair had once believed herself to be in control. A woman of reason, precision, and poise, she had built a career out of navigating chaos, dissecting the lies of others, and turning information into leverage. But ever since she stepped into the cold, calculated orbit of Aristotle Dumas, her instincts, once razor-sharp, had begun to dull. Or worse, to betray her. At first, their connection had been intellectual, magnetic in a way that defied logic. Dumas was unlike any man she had known, powerful, elusive, strategic. His mind was a fortress, and she had been flattered to be invited inside. But now, in the suffocating quiet of the estate he ruled like a deity, Amanda began to see him not as a genius, but as a predator. There were too many locked doors, too many whispered instructions from staff with hollow eyes, too many questions about guests who arrived smiling but seemed to vanish behind closed corridors. Something was wrong. Very wrong. And Amanda no longer felt like a partner. She felt like prey. What had once been fascination was now fear. She had seen it in his eyes, the way they darkened when she questioned him, the calculated stillness of his hands when she mentioned Victor Newman by name, the flicker of something cruel when she asked if she could leave early to tend to unfinished business back in Genoa City. Aristotle Dumas did not deny her requests. He studied them, measured them, stored them like evidence. And Amanda, once so adept at reading others, found herself second-guessing every word, every look, every step. She no longer believed she was special to him. In fact, she suspected she had never been. She had been useful, entertaining, informative, but not valued, not loved, and certainly not safe. The realization came slowly at first, then all at once, like a dam breaking in her chest. She was in danger. Real danger. And if she didn't act soon, she would not make it out. That was how she found herself slipping away in the early hours of the morning, when the estate was at its quietest, shrouded in a fog that felt almost sentient. She didn't use the car Dumas had assigned to her. She walked through fields and forests and muddy back roads until she found the helipad. She bribed a pilot who owed her a favor. She didn't pack a bag. She brought only her phone and her trembling breath, and she flew. Not to her family, not to the police, but to the one man she believed could outmatch Dumas, Victor Newman. Victor wasn't surprised to see her. He had suspected for weeks that Amanda's disappearance from Genoa City hadn't been a vacation or a legal retreat. He had eyes everywhere, and the name Dumas had raised more than a few alarms. But he had not anticipated the way Amanda burst into his private office, eyes bloodshot, face pale, barely able to speak through the sobs. It was rare to see Amanda undone. She had always been controlled, almost icy in her professionalism. But now she collapsed at his feet, trembling and desperate, grabbing his wrist with both hands as she begged him, literally begged him, to help her escape before it was too late. "He's watching everything," she cried, voice cracking under the weight of panic. "He knows things he shouldn't know. About all of us. About you. And I think I'm next." Victor had seen many things in his lifetime: schemes, betrayals, power grabs, but few things unsettled him more than the sight of a woman with Amanda's strength reduced to terrified pleading. He helped her into the chair across from him, poured her a glass of water, and asked her one question: why now? And Amanda told him everything. Not just the subtle threats. Not just the locked rooms. But the deeper truth. The secrets Dumas had weaponized, the psychological tests he'd embedded into every conversation, the quiet way he turned his allies into captives and captives into corpses of their former selves. She told Victor that Dumas didn't just want to win. He wanted to reshape power in Genoa City in his own image. That he saw Newman, Abbott, and Chancellor as relics, symbols of a system that needed to be shattered and rebuilt. And Amanda? She had been his legal key. His backdoor. His unknowing accomplice in a far more elaborate plan than she had ever imagined. But now she was done. Now she wanted out. And in exchange for protection, she would give Victor everything: access codes, surveillance routes, personal weaknesses. Dumas' entire infrastructure, from the inside out. Victor said nothing at first. He leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled, studying her. Amanda thought she saw pity in his eyes. Or maybe doubt. Was he questioning her story? Her motives? Or was he, like her, wondering if she had already been compromised? She couldn't blame him. After all, who was to say this wasn't a trap? That she wasn't the trap? Because even as Victor considered her plea, in a hidden surveillance room across the estate in France, Dumas watched the feed with a calm, unreadable expression. Amanda had played her part well, he had trained her better than she knew. He had always expected her to run. He had even encouraged it, in the subtlest of ways. Because Dumas didn't just set traps. He designed plays. And every act had a role. Amanda was the cry for help. Victor was the self-proclaimed savior. And he? He was the architect. The moment Victor opened his doors and took Amanda in, he believed he had one. But Dumas was counting on that. Still, something in Dumas' expression shifted when he heard Amanda say, "He doesn't love anyone. Not even himself. He only plays at emotion. And I was a fool to think I meant something to him." That, perhaps, stung. Just a little. Victor called his private security team within the hour. "We're going to end this," he said to Amanda, voice low and deliberate. "But if you're lying to me, if this is some game you and Dumas are playing together, you won't just lose my protection. You'll lose everything." "I'm not lying," Amanda whispered. "I'm surviving." Back in France, Dumas paced the hall of mirrors in the east wing of the estate, his favorite corridor. Each pane reflected a different version of himself. Calm. Angry. Curious. Betrayed. He let his fingers brush against the cold glass, pausing at one where Amanda's reflection once stood beside his. "You shouldn't have done that," he said softly, to no one. And then he smiled. Because the final game had begun. And everyone believed they were the player. No one realized they were all already pieces. Let me know if you'd like the next part of this storyline. Amanda under protection at Newman Ranch, Dumas sending a false gift to Victor, or the shocking moment when Amanda herself may no longer be sure if she's free, or just his most dangerous creation. He saw everything. Every movement. Every whisper. Every stolen glance and tremor of hesitation that passed through the corridors of the estate. Aristotle Dumas had built his empire on control, and nothing embodied that more than the walls he had laced with surveillance. To others, they were stone and wood, opulence and art. To him, they were mirrors. And through them, he watched Amanda. Watched her breathe, watched her cry when she thought no one could see, watched her flinch when the wind touched the bruises she tried to conceal. Because Aristotle didn't just know what Amanda was doing, he made sure she did it. What the world didn't know, and what Amanda had spent months hiding, was the nightmare behind the velvet curtains. Behind the cameras and the private jets, behind the illusion of partnership and charm, there existed something far darker. Dumas was not a lover. He was not a partner. He was a captor. And Amanda, once so proud and strong, had been broken piece by piece. The bruises didn't start as punches. They started as pressure. Guilt. Commands disguised as suggestions. Emotional sabotage disguised as concern. He isolated her under the guise of protection, cut off her contacts with quiet efficiency, and whenever she resisted, whenever that fire in her eyes reignited, he extinguished it with cruelty. And then, it escalated. He began to strike her when she defied him. It was never in public, never where his carefully cultivated mask could crack. But in private, when the cameras were trained on her like predators and the walls seemed to breathe with his presence, Amanda suffered. He would hit her. shake her, shove her, call her names that tore at the very core of who she was. And each time, he would say it was her fault. That she was ungrateful. That she needed to learn obedience. That he was teaching her how to survive in his world. But the worst part, the part that Amanda couldn't forgive, was that this monster had once worn the face of someone she trusted. Because Dumas wasn't just any man. He was Cain Ashby. Or at least, he had been. Somewhere along the way, Cain had died. Maybe it was metaphorical, maybe the pressures of loss, power, and betrayal had corroded whatever decency he once possessed. Or maybe it had always been there, hiding beneath his charm. But the man Amanda had known, the man who once smiled and promised safety, no longer existed. In his place stood a tyrant. A psychopath who used power not just to dominate, but to dehumanize. The realization shattered Amanda. Not because she loved him, but because she had believed in him. Had vouched for him. Had defended him when others doubted. Now she felt like a fool. Worse, an accomplice to her own torment. She had tried to escape before. But each attempt ended in more pain. More control. And always, he would whisper, "I know everything you do." And he did. Because the estate was his machine. The cameras were his eyes. The staff were his shadows. She couldn't move without him knowing. Couldn't speak without risking reprisal. He had built a prison out of beauty and called it a sanctuary. And she had lived in it, pretending she was free. But not anymore. Victor's voice still echoed in her mind, sharp, commanding, skeptical. "If this is a game, Amanda, you're going to lose everything." And that was the truth. Because now, having revealed Dumas' secrets to Victor, she knew the punishment would come. Not if, when. The betrayal wasn't just personal. It was public. And Dumas, for all his control, had one weakness, pride. She had wounded it. And now she had to run faster than his wrath. But deep down, Amanda feared it was already too late. She had felt it the moment she stepped onto the Newman jet. The cold crawl at the back of her neck. The silence that was too deliberate. Dumas was watching. Of course he was. He had always been watching. And that was his final cruelty, not just that he hurt her, but that he made her question whether anyone would believe her. He had covered his tracks so well, masked his brutality behind charm and intellect, that even as she spoke the truth, she wondered, would the world see her as a victim or a liar? She hated that. Hated that he had made her doubt herself. Why did Cain, Aristotle, become this monster? She didn't know. But maybe the better question was, had he ever not been? Let me know if you'd like to continue this story with Amanda being hunted again, or switch to Victor's retaliation now that he knows the truth, or perhaps both. The next chapter can involve Dumas manipulating the public narrative, Amanda's life being put in danger again, and Victor preparing a global takedown using the weaknesses Amanda revealed. Aristotle Dumas watched. Quietly. Methodically. Obsessively. He sat in the heart of the chateau. The core of the labyrinthine estate where light rarely touched the ground and sound was swallowed by dense walls lined with equipment and screens. From here, he observed everything, the nervous laughter, the strained conversations, the subtle glances exchanged between guests who no longer trusted one another. The estate's surveillance system was flawless, silent drones, micro-cameras embedded in antique sconces, microphones beneath champagne trays. Every hallway. Every terrace. Every word. His guests believed they were participating in an exclusive celebration, Victor Newman's luncheon in the south of France, a gathering of Genoa City's elite beneath the pretense of civility. But Dumas had other plans. For him, this wasn't a party. It was a puzzle. And they were the pieces. The grand reveal was coming, and he could almost taste it. Weeks of manipulation, of planting seeds in minds and twisting loyalties, would culminate in a single, orchestrated moment. Dumas didn't just want to be seen, he wanted to be unforgettable. He wanted to etch himself into the minds of the powerful, not as a man, but as a force. A reckoning. They would remember him long after they left this place, if they were permitted to leave at all. Lily Winters stood near the edge of the ballroom terrace, her hands wrapped around a crystal flute that had long since gone warm. Her smile, polished and pleasant, masked the storm churning behind her eyes. She wasn't here for the wine, the company, or even the opportunity to rub shoulders with Genoa City's upper echelon. She was here for answers. For weeks, she had chased whispers about Dumas, his wealth, his reach, his sudden infiltration of every major sector in their lives. She knew something was off. His name appeared where it shouldn't, attached to companies that had no public face, decisions that made no sense unless viewed through a very specific lens: control. He was too quiet, too clean. And people that invisible usually had something to hide. Now, surrounded by marble statues and candlelight, Lily was done waiting. She had no intention of leaving this chateau without clarity. If Dumas thought he could dangle mystery in front of her like a prize, he was about to learn that Winter's women didn't chase, they confronted. And so, during the Thursday toast, when all eyes were on Victor and Nikki, Lily would rise. She would make bold declarations. She would press for truth. Not just for herself, but for everyone. Because if no one else had the courage to challenge the veil Dumas had wrapped around this entire affair, then she would. Whatever game he was playing, it ended with her. Jack Abbott, meanwhile, was unraveling in real time. He had been uneasy since the moment they arrived. It wasn't just the strange detours, or the forced activities that resembled rituals more than entertainment. It was the eyes. The feeling of being watched. The way the staff responded to every question with a polite but hollow smile. The way every door seemed to lead somewhere you weren't meant to be. At first, Jack had dismissed it as paranoia, a product of decades of corporate warfare and too many secrets. But the more he experienced Dumas' carefully curated chaos, the less he believed in coincidence. The maze they had been forced through earlier in the day hadn't been whimsical. It had been sinister. Designed to disorient, to divide. And it had worked. Diane was visibly shaken. Kyle had argued with Audra over something as trivial as the direction of a path, and Jack had felt something in himself crack, the realization that this trip, this event, might not just be suspicious. It might be dangerous. When word came that the private jet scheduled to return them to Genoa City was grounded due to mechanical concerns, Jack's blood ran cold. He'd been in this game too long to ignore the pattern. First the misdirection. Then the isolation. Now the removal of escape. The walls weren't just physical anymore, they were psychological. Dumas wasn't trying to impress them. He was testing them. And Jack hated being someone else's test subject. For the first time in years, he wished he had walked away. The honeymoon plans he'd rescheduled, the quiet escape he and Diane had promised themselves, they suddenly seemed like the smarter option. This was supposed to be a celebration, not a siege. And yet, here they were. Trapped in an estate that felt less like a palace and more like a predator with velvet fangs. He leaned over to Diane in the dimly lit corridor that connected the east wing to the dining hall, his voice low but tight. "We need to leave. Tonight. I don't care if we walk." Diane looked at him, startled. "Jack, what are you talking about? We can't just disappear." "I'm not asking for permission," he snapped, then immediately softened when he saw the fear flash in her eyes. "I'm sorry. I just... Something's wrong. We both feel it. You know it." Diane didn't argue. She didn't need to. They were far past denial. Back in the control room, Dumas turned the volume up slightly. He watched as Jack pulled Diane aside. Watched Lily pacing near the glass railing, rehearsing her speech to herself. He watched them all of mice in a maze, unaware that the maze itself was alive. He admired Jack's instincts. He respected Lily's defiance. But he had anticipated both. And that was the beauty of his plan. No matter how loudly they screamed, how cleverly they schemed, they were still inside his design. And the clock was ticking. He opened a drawer in front of him and pulled out a slim envelope, black, embossed with a symbol none of the guests had seen before. Inside it was a name. Just one. The name of the person who would not leave the estate when the luncheon ended. He didn't smile. Not this time. This wasn't a game anymore. This was the final act. And the audience had no idea that they were sitting in a theater built on lies, watching a show that would end with a curtain soaked in truth, and possibly blood. Let me know if you'd like to continue with Lily's speech and Dumas' dramatic response, or Jack trying to escape but being intercepted, or Amanda returning to warn everyone just as the reveal is about to begin.